There's a misconception that when the government spends money, it creates jobs. And the misconception is understandable because we see this money coming from the government and it creates income for people and they spend the money and that generates income for other people. And what we're forgetting is that the money doesn't fall from space. The government obtains the money by taxing or borrowing, and when it does those things, jobs are destroyed. So at the end of the day, the government isn't creating jobs, it's moving jobs. Jobs leave where the government taxes and borrows and appears where the government spends. So let's look at data for the United States. If we go back to 1950, from 1950 to the present, we'll look at quarterly data and compare changes in government spending to economic growth. Now, if stimulus spending worked, what we should see is as the government increases spending, we should see the economy grow, and in periods when the government cuts back on spending, we should see the economy contract. And that's not what we see. When we actually look at the data, we just see a cloud of nonsense. We can give the benefit of the doubt to the government by doing things like comparing government spending today to economic growth next year, or comparing the weighted average of government spending over the past 4 quarters to the weighted average of economic growth over the next 4 quarters. We can do those things, and what happens is, in the best case scenario, what we see is still no relationship between government spending and economic growth. In the worst case scenario, we actually see a negative relationship. That is, as the government spends more money, the economy actually contracts. A colleague of mine and I conducted a study of federal matching funds in Texas. And the question we were asking is, what happens as federal money comes into the state of Texas? And what we found was that actually for every dollar of federal money that comes into Texas, eventually Texas economy contracts by more than $1. Contrary to common conceptions, it's not that the government is giving you money that you can now spend. Rather, the government is taking money from you in the form of taxes, in the form of borrowing, and telling you how you're going to spend that. We all have a limited amount of money we can spend. What matters to us is that we take these limited resources and we use them in the best possible way. And that can take the form of, you've got $20 in your pocket and you want to spend it on this versus that. Or it could take the form of a company or an industry has a fixed amount of resources that it could use to produce this product versus that product. So everywhere in the economy, we're always making these choices as to how to use our resources, how to use our money to get the most out of this. Economic contraction occurs when someone comes in and tells you you must spend your resources in a way that you would not choose to spend of your own volition. So what's happening is, by definition, you're being forced to allocate your resources in a fashion that is not in your best interests. In the last 3 years, the federal government has taken the equivalent of 2 Canadian economies and stuffed them into the United States economy. And what's happened? What's happened is we saw the unemployment rate skyrocket from 6-7% up to 10%, and it held there and at 9% for a long time thereafterwards. If 2 Canadian economies worth of stimulus spending can't stimulate your economy, then there must be something fundamentally flawed about the concept of stimulus spending. The fallacy in stimulus spending is that we're only looking at half the picture. We see the money that's spent and we completely ignore the taxation that raises that money in the first place. So the question is, how do we stimulate the economy? And the answer to that is sitting right in front of us. It's the private sector. And by private sector, I don't mean business. What I mean is free people allowed to make decisions that are in their own self-interest. So when you go to the store and you choose brand A over brand B, you're rewarding a company for a job well done. And when a company looks to spend its money to invest, it looks around to see how it can serve people in the best possible way, because it knows when it serves people well, that creates profit for the company. That dynamic interaction a free interaction between consumers and producers is what generates jobs, it's what generates wealth. The best thing the government can do to encourage that interaction is to get out of the way.